Welcome to GRD132 Typography 1, and in this video, hopefully a short video and a simple video, I'm going to go over kerning and tracking. And tracking is sometimes known as character spacing, and I'm just going to make some very basic type logos here, and it's even something I've used in the past in the graphic design course. So I'm just going to start off by just taking my text tool and Gravit, and you could do this afterwards or along with me if you want. And I'm just going to click here and I'm just going to type Moravian. I'm going to hold down my shift key because I'm going to do it in all caps because the non-pro version of Gravit doesn't let you turn it into caps very easy. So I'm just going to type Moravian. I'll zoom in here a little bit, and right now it's just in that open sans, and I think the version I had in the past I used EB So let me go find EB and there's EB and that's a very conservative type font. I'll make it nice and big. I'll put it up to 60, and I'll keep my cursor over here and make sure it's 60 pixels. And what I'll do is I'll copy this. Now to copy it, you can duplicate it and do Command D or Control D. I'm just going to hold down my Alt or Option key and just make a copy. And I'm going to double click in here and then do Control A or Command A and highlight everything, or you could just highlight it yourself and type college in all caps. To make a logo out of these two elements of type, I mean, I could just center this. That doesn't look much like a logo unless you had some kind of graphic or something. You could bring them closer together, but still it doesn't look like much yet. What I'd like to do is spread this out. Now, I could bring this over here and spread it out a little bit. Now, I don't want to make it bigger. Now, first of all, to scale this in Gravit, I'm going to go down here. They have this auto scale font. So I'm going to turn this little block on, and the bottom corner turns red. Now, if I just drag on this, I don't have to hold shift. I could just drag in a 45-degree angle. Now, if I did something like that, I could make that like that. Now, that's okay. I mean, college is a lot bigger. It's not more important than the name, but it is centered now, and it has some alignment on either side. That could work. I'll make this just a little bit bigger, like that. So that could work. That could sort of make a logo. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to go back and put this the way it was. This is 74, this is 60. I'm going to go back and put this at 60 so they're both the same point size. And I'll type 60 in there. And sometimes if I keep my cursor right here, there we go. Now I'm going to go back like this, and I'm going to put this auto button auto. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to spread out the tracking. That means the character spacing between the letters to make it the same width, because that way they're kind of equal, and it'll even lighten up college a little bit. Now, one thing you don't want to do, especially with auto scale font on, is you don't want to go here and stretch this out. Now, why? Well, for one thing, you just distorted the font and made it kind of into an expanded font, and it looks different than the other one. So it's a little distorted right now. That's not the way you want to stretch things out. Now, sometimes we'll do that to make things more condensed or more expanded, but doing that is just kind of cheating in a way. So we don't want to do that. That's distorting the original font. So I'm going to undo that. And what I am going to do is adjust the tracking, or the character spacing as they call it in here. So I'm going to go in here and I'll just start with like 0.1 and see what that does. And there's 0.1, and it's starting to spread out. See, it's putting space in between the letters. So I'll go a little more. I'll try 0.13, and I'll keep going up a little bit. Sometimes dragging on here makes it go too much, so I'm just putting in numbers. So I'll try 0.15. That should be pretty close. And I want the widths to be nice and even on either side, and I'll nudge it down a little. Now, remember, it's nudged together by using the design element of proximity. When they're nice and close together, that means they're meant to go together. They have a relationship. It forms like this little box here. So that looks better. It keeps this college the same size. It's not a bigger size. And by spreading it out, it makes it lighter. So Moravian still kind of stands out a little bit better. There's some equality between them. Now, the only issue we have here, I don't know if you can see it, we're talking about what's called tracking, or what's called character spacing between here. We have an issue up here between these two letters. Now, I'm going to drag in a guide just to show you something, and I'll move this down temporarily. You might think, why are those two letters so far apart? And they're not necessarily. Actually, if I bring a guide in, I'm not sure if my guides are on, you can see the letters are right next to each other, just like the other letters are. If I zoom in here and look at that guide, that's about where they should be, except because the A angles to the left and this one kind of angles to the right, at least on the bottom, they form this weird gap here, and it doesn't read nicely. So what you almost have to do is adjust the spacing so they overlap more. And it's kind of like cheating. It's called kerning, and sometimes fonts will automatically do that. It'll be built into the particular font, but here it's obviously not. So to fix that, in regular programs like InDesign and even Illustrator, typically what you do is go in here and you would click your cursor, and that's how you adjust kerning, affects kerning. But they don't do that here. They don't have a kerning setting, but what you can do is just highlight the letter before it. So if you want space tightened here, if you highlight this A and you put a negative value in here, now I'll just start and just put negative 0.05 and just see what happens. It pulls it closer. Now I could probably go a little bit more, and I'll go negative 0.10. And already that looks better. Now I'm just going to kind of click off and go back a little bit, and you want to make sure it's not too tight. There's like a subtle science of this. Even some of these other letters. Now you wouldn't do this for everything, but if you're working on a logo you might. So I'm going to highlight the M here, and I'm not going to do as much as I did for the A and V, but I might go in here and do a negative 0.05, do about half the amount, and just bring the O into that little area there between the serif on the bottom and the serif on the top. And then same thing here, I might even do it for the O, just to tighten this up a little bit. Now I don't want to tighten up all the letters because they're touching here. I don't want them overlapping. Some of them are fine, and I don't want to mess with them. I don't want to have overlapping serifs, but where you don't have serifs here and where you have this kind of flip-flop between the A and V, that's where you have to tighten things up. And also, you know, either side of the O here creates a problem because there's more empty space. So I'll do the same thing here. I'll use negative 0.05 and tighten that up a little bit. So now that looks a little bit better. If I click off, that looks a little tighter now. And now if I move college back up here, it's probably going to be too big, so I might have to adjust my tracking on college again and maybe put it down to 0.13 and see how that looks. And maybe 0.12, and maybe even just 0.1. We'll go down to 0.1. And that looks good, I think. I'm thinking it might be 0.11. All right, that looks okay. And I'm going to drag this up here and just nudge it a little bit closer, nudge it over, and then you could always use guides to kind of bring them over. And sometimes the rounded letters like a C will extend out a little bit. That's okay. And I want to make sure that the serifs are about at the same place over here. And they're pretty close here. That this line, the stroke in the end comes down and follows that. So they're not perfect, but I'm going to leave it like that. I'm not going to adjust it too much because I'm zoomed in. It's very, if you zoomed out, you know, you wouldn't really notice it, but I just wanted to do that. So again, just to review, this is tracking that we did on the letters, and this did not have tracking, but we used kerning, which is basically adjusting the character pairs. Between the A and V, we highlight the first letter and we adjust that. So when I went in here and highlighted the A, I made that negative 0.1, and I also did it for both the M and the O one at a time, because if you're doing the space in between, you have to do it with one letter. So in here, I'm doing negative 0.05, and I'm also doing it here. Where you need this sometimes, if you ever have drop caps or those decorative first letters in a paragraph, sometimes they could really throw off the kerning as well. And this one I went back a little bit, so that tightens everything up really nice. And the tracking here is being used as a design element, and the kerning here is being used as an element just to kind of adjust and fix the spacing a little bit, just to tweak things. I'll use that term tweaking to make kind of a logo here. So that's the first part of this. Again, I just wanted to mention tracking, wanted to mention kerning. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another logo out of this using a different font. And let me do that in part 2, just so I'm not going real long here, because sometimes talking about this, it gets real long. So in part 2, we're going to do a little bit more with tracking.